Before that pen scratches another lie into the record, look at me. Really look at me. In less than an hour they will kill me, and when I am gone this empire will tell itself a comforting story. It will say a monster ruled Halcyon Prime, the Inquisition came, justice was done, the rot was cut out. That is the lie. The truth is uglier. The truth is that this world stayed alive only because I did everything you are about to condemn. So do not rake the page like you are skinning an animal. For the sake of the throne, show a dying man a sliver of respect. You are writing it all down, are you not? Every word, every breath, every swallow. For whom? For an inquisitor, for the administratum, or for some protocol sheet that will be tied shut, stamped, buried in an archive on Terra and forgotten for the next 10,000 years? Most likely the last. That is the great joke of the Imperium. You are so obsessed with recording sins that you never have time to read them. Good wine, a vintage from before the hive collapse. It costs more than your regiment earns in a year if your regiment is paid at all, and this slab of servitor meat is not bad either. Look at me. No, in the eyes, not at the implants. What do you see? A heretic, a traitor, a beast who sold his soul to ruinous powers for power. I see what reflects in your lenses. A tired old man in a filthy doublet. Governor Cassian Vale, the man who held this sector together with his teeth for 30 years while the rest of you prayed. You accuse me of corruption, collusion, and of letting blasphemy seep into the sacred engines of Halcyon Prime. Do you know what is funny? If I had not done it, this world would have frozen and starved 20 years ago. You would not have come here to execute me. You would have come to gather bones. How much time do we have? An hour, perhaps. While the Arbites prepare the injection or the firing line, there is time enough. I will tell you how it truly happened, not to defend myself. Guilty men defend themselves. I only want one living soul to understand what survival looks like in a cruel world. Write that down. Begin with the day I put on this cursed chain. I was 42. The age when an aristocrat is supposed to hunt scaled beasts on private preserves or ruin himself in the brothels of the upper spire. I did not want power. Throne witness me, I was afraid of it. My father, Governor Marius Vale, died without heroism. No assassin took him. He did not fall in battle. A vessel in his skull burst in the middle of an irrigation council meeting. He fell face first onto a map of the lower hive and washed it in spit and blood. Symbolic, was it not? I remember the smell in the office that morning when I first entered it as master. It did not smell of power. It smelled of stale sweat, medicine, and the ozone stink of overheated cogitators. The first thing I saw was not generals swearing loyalty, not a delegation from the ecclesiarchy. I saw them instead, the auditors of the administratum. They sat at the long table like vultures in gray robes, pale parchment skin, fingers stained black with ink. They did not even stand when I entered. Their leader, Prefect Maravan Drake, only slid an enfoplate toward me. "My condolences for your loss, Lord Vale," he said in a voice with as much feeling as a rusted hinge. "However, your father's death does not erase Halcyon Prime's obligations to the God Emperor. Review the current balance." I took the slate, numbers, red runes, endless moving lines. Have you ever seen debt on a planetary scale? It is not just money. It is tons of promethium, millions of cattle, billions of ammunition crates, recruits for the guard. My father had lied. He had lied to everyone. For the last 5 years he had sent false reports to Terra, covering the holes in the budget with loans from unsanctioned traders and stripping the strategic reserves bare. "The tithe shortfall stands at 18%, Drake said, tapping the table with his stylus. "This level is unacceptable. If by next quarter you have not covered the deficit and returned output to plan levels, the Imperium will reconsider the status of your world." Do you know what that means? Reconsider the status of your world. It means the administratum decides that ruling us is no longer profitable. They replace the government, perhaps by force, or they declare us a penal world and squeeze us dry, leaving not even drinking water behind. I looked out the window. From the height of the spire, Halcyon Prime was an endless sea of gray concrete and smoke. Down in the tangled streets, 12 billion souls crawled through another day. They woke. They ate tasteless paste made from processed algae. They went to the machines. They prayed to the emperor. They died. They believed the governor was a demigod who protected them. And there I stood, gripping the slate until my knuckles whitened, understanding that I had no resources left. The mines were exhausted. The factories ran beyond their limits. The equipment had not been replaced in 300 years. Men and women collapsed from exhaustion right on the lines. I need time, I told him. Reduce the quota for 1 year and I can modernize. Drake cut me off without even lifting his eyes from the papers. The Imperium fights on 1,000 fronts, Lord Vale. Orcs in the Armageddon sector do not ask for time. Tyranids do not wait for you to modernize your foundries. The quota is not a subject for discussion. The quota is the will of the Emperor. Failure to fulfill the Emperor's will is heresy. Heresy that simple, not mismanagement, not failure, heresy. He rose, gathered his scrolls, and walked to the door. On the threshold, he turned back. You have 3 months until the next transport convoy, Governor. Find the resources, or we will find another governor. The door closed. I was alone. In the silence, the office ventilator droned and pushed stale air in circles. I went to the sector map. 12 billion people and a debt that could not be paid honestly. I poured my first glass. I did not drink this much back then, but my hands were already shaking. I had a choice. Tell the truth. We are bankrupt, help us. And then we would have been crushed, dismantled, the population turned into servitors. Or I could find a way to make the rusted gears turn faster, whatever it cost. I summoned the chief of security and asked how much food could be cut from the lower levels without causing an immediate famine riot. He looked at me in horror. My lord, they already eat rats. If we cut rations, the riots begin at once. Then prepare to put down riots, I answered. Because if we do not ship shells, hungry workers with spanners will not be the ones who come through those doors. The Astartes will. That was my first step, my first small incision across the conscience. I thought it was temporary. I thought I would tighten belts now and save everyone later. I was an idiot. Keep writing. The subject admits he knowingly condemned the lower hive to hunger in order to satisfy bureaucratic targets. It sounds elegant when written in proper office language. But that was only the beginning. The real hell started when I learned that hunger alone was not enough. Machines need more than power. They need grease. Have you ever heard a hunger riot from 2 kilometers above it? Not voices. At that height, the human voice dissolves. It becomes a hum, a low, vibrating hum that makes the windows in the spire tremble, as if somewhere in the bowels of the hive a giant pipe had burst and steam was rushing out. Only it is not steam, it is hatred. 3 weeks after I cut the food, it began. Gamma Sector, the smelter halls. The workers simply sat down on the floor. They did not break machinery. They did not have the strength. They sat and refused to stand until someone fed them. The conveyors stopped. Silence on a factory floor is more terrifying than any scream. When the hammers of the Imperium fall quiet, the administratum starts sharpening knives. I stood in the command center of the law enforcement forces. Green tactical displays all around me, Vox static in the air. General Reinhard Beck, an old soldier with a cybernetic eye that had seen my grandfather alive, turned toward me. I watched his cheek twitch. My lord, he said, there are 10,000 people down there. Women, children from the labor dormitories. They are just sitting. We cannot open fire on people who are sitting. This is not rebellion. It is despair. I looked at the grainy black and white feed from the security cameras. A sea of heads. Filthy, thin faces tilted up toward the lenses. They were waiting for an answer. They were waiting for the father of the hive to arrive and feed them. Then I looked at another screen. The ammunition shipment graph. The red line was dropping. Every 10 minutes of stoppage meant thousands of lasguns not completed, another container missing from the front. And I remembered Drake's words. Failure to fulfill the Emperor's will is heresy. If I showed mercy, the administratum would remove me, send another governor, and that new man, eager to prove himself, would burn Gamma Sector to the foundations and send the rest to the servitor yards. 10,000 die today or 1,000,000 die tomorrow. There you have it, the logic of the bloodless cannibal. I walked to the Vox console, pressed the general broadcast rune and said nothing. I only looked at Beck. General, my voice was calm, too calm. Even I was startled by how little it sounded like my own. You have your orders. Restore the shift by any means necessary. My lord, we do not have enough non-lethal equipment. The gas stores were exhausted in the last riot. If we move in, we will have to fire to kill. General, I leaned close enough to smell the machine oil on his uniform. The Imperium does not need excuses. The Imperium needs shells. Clear the floor. Beck went pale. His good eye widened. He understood all of it. It will be done, he whispered. I did not leave. I made myself watch. I watched the lines of Arbites in heavy armor enter the hall. I saw the first muzzle flashes from the shotguns. I saw the crowd sway like one organism, then shatter. Silent on the screen, hell in the real world below. People ran, fell, crawled over their own companions. Blood mixed with machine oil on the factory floor. Do you know how slippery that mixture is? Even the Arbites fell in it, skidding over what remained of the workers. In 40 minutes the hall was empty. The corpses were bulldozed into disposal chutes. Hoses washed the red slurry into the drains. 20 minutes later, a new shift dragged in from a neighboring sector took their places at the machines. They kept their eyes down as they walked across the wet floor. They knew what the moisture under their boots was, and they worked twice as fast. Fear is magnificent fuel. It burns brighter than promethium. That evening we exceeded quota by 3%. I went back to my office, poured myself a drink and stared into the mirror. I searched my face for the mark of chaos, horns, a third eye, anything that would prove I had become a monster. But the man in the glass was the same man. The only difference was that now I knew the price of one shift. 3,112 lives. That was the cost of meeting target that day. I slept like the dead that night. No dreams. It turns out conscience only torments you until the first great crime. After that it goes numb like a frozen limb. You know it should ache, but all you feel is cold emptiness. Write that down, scribe. The accused admits to the mass murder of imperial citizens, but add a note. Because of that murder, an imperial regiment received its ammunition on time and held the line. Who is the greater hero then? Me, who killed thousands to save millions, or the clean officer who pulled a trigger on a rifle made in my factories, by my slaves, with my people's blood? But fear only carries you so far. People break and broken people do not work. I needed something else. So I made a bargain with the men I should have hanged. Write the next chapter about how I invited filth into my house. Official imperial power ends where the ventilation shafts of the lower levels begin. On administratum maps, those places are marked as residential sectors and auxiliary conduits. In truth, they are dark, rusting, poisonous jungles where a governor has fewer rights than a rat, if the rat has sharper teeth. I needed hands. The ones I had ordered washed into the sewers and rendered down had to be replaced by someone. The recruitment offices stood empty. People were afraid to walk into factories where entire shifts were shot. So I did what any commissar would have executed me on the spot for. I invited the king of the Underhive to dinner. His name was Drogon, Drogon the Butcher, head of the Black Rot cartel. I ordered the observation servitors in the small dining room switched off. I sent the guards outside. I sat alone at a redwood table older than every generation in Drogon's bloodline combined. He came not through the ceremonial doors, but through the service lift. I will never forget the smell, not just unwashed flesh. He smelled of old sour sweat, cheap synthetic tobacco, and the chemicals used to process corpses. He was enormous. He wore a stolen officer's coat over a filthy flak vest, and on his feet were heavy mag boots that left black oily prints across my carpet. The carpet cost more than his life, and he trod on it as if it were dirt. "Fine room, Chief," he said without bowing. His voice rasped like metal dragged over concrete. "Got any wine?" I poured him a crystal goblet. He took it in a paw half made of crude claw-like prosthetics, swallowed it like water and belched. "Why did you call me?" He did not call me Lord. "Have your Arbite's hounds tucked their tails, or do you want me to find you a girl who does not glow in the dark?" I swallowed the bile in my throat. I looked at him and saw not a man but a tool, rusty, filthy, dangerous, and useful. "I need workers, Drogon," I said plainly. "My lines are stalling. I need 10,000 laborers by the end of the week, and I need them not to ask questions, not to riot, and not to faint from hunger." Drogon laughed and leaned back until the leather creaked. "You butchered the last shift, Chief. Word travels. Nobody is coming to you willingly now, not even for double rations. Down below they call you Bloody Vale. Congratulations on the title." "I do not care about titles. I need results. You control the flop houses, the debt pits, the dens. You have people nobody wants. Debtors, addicts, fugitives." He narrowed his one living eye. Greed flashed in it. "You want slaves, Governor. Call things by their names. You want me to hunt meat for you and drive it into your factories." "I want the Emperor's quota met," I said. "Name your price." Drogon leaned forward, took a silver fork from the table, and picked his teeth with it. "Price, I do not need money. Your credits are worth less below than toilet paper. I need air." "Air?" "Room to breathe, Vale. Your Arbites are strangling my dream shipments. It is a little mixture. Helps people forget they live in filth. Your dog seized 3 caravans in 1 month. Tell them to go blind." I went still. Dreams. Cheap narcotics cooked from industrial runoff and warped dust. It turns a man into a drooling idiot in a year and kills him in 3. I should have called the guards and shot him where he sat. Trafficking that poison was a crime against the human stock. But the clock in my skull kept ticking. 10,000 workers, the tithe. If I refused, the factories would stall. The administratum would come. The Astartes would come. "If I give you room," I said slowly, "you will deliver bodies." "More than bodies, Chief." Drogon smiled, showing rotten teeth. "Let me feed dreams right into the factory canteens, small doses, of course. Your new workers will labor for 20 hours. It will not hurt. It will not scare them. It will feel good. They will love their machines more than their wives until they die. And when they die, I will send more." I looked at him. I looked at a devil in a stolen coat. He was offering to turn my planet's population into smiling drugged cattle. But Throne help me, he was offering a solution, an efficient one. "The Arbites," I said. My voice shook once, then steadied. "The Arbites will receive orders to redeploy to the northern sectors for exercises. The southern sluices will be unwatched at night." Drogon stood and held out his hand. A filthy, calloused hand blackened by soot. I had to take it. That was the seal on my own sentence. I pulled off my glove. My skin was pale and soft. His was like grinding stone. "Agreed, partner," he said. After he left, I washed my hands for a long time. I scrubbed with a hard brush until the skin split and bled. Even then, I could still feel the greasy film of his handshake on my palm. That month production rose by 40%. The administratum sent me a commendation sealed in red wax for exemplary diligence and innovative labor management. I framed it and hung it directly above the place where Drogon had sat when we made our agreement. Funny, is it not? The Imperium rewarded me for selling my people to gangsters and dosing them into obedience. Numbers, only numbers matter. As long as the numbers are green, Terra does not care what color blood wrote them. Write that down, scribe. The accused entered into conspiracy with organized criminal elements, sanctioned narcotics trafficking, and employed slave labor. It sounds horrible. Do you know what was more horrible? When I walked the factory floors in those days, I saw smiles. Toothless, lunatic, narcotic smiles on workers who were dying at their stations and happy while it happened. I gave them forgetfulness. Is that not mercy? But appetites grow, Drogon's appetite, the Imperium's appetite, the appetite of whatever watched from behind them both. Before long other visitors came, the kind who had no use for money or drugs. They wanted something worse. Take a clean sheet. Now comes the real filth. Do you know the mistake every tyrant makes? He thinks that once one problem is solved, the worst is over. In the Imperium, problems never end. They mutate. I gave the workers drugs and they stopped complaining. They worked for 20 hours at a stretch. Their eyes turned to glass. Their mouths kept smiling while their hands fed metal into the lines. But narcotics have side effects. The people became consumables and could endure the pace. The machines could not. Steel does not take dreams. The old machines that had been standing since the days of the Horus Heresy began to crack. Axles overheated. Pistons seized. We drove output so hard the equipment simply burned itself apart. And when I thought only a miracle could save me, someone knocked. It was not an official visit. No fanfare. No honors. My secretary said that independent contractors had arrived on the recommendation of my new friend Drogon. I expected another band of smugglers or Xenos tech thieves. Instead, two figures entered my office. They were tall and robed, but not in Mechanicus red. Their robes were the color of old bone, dirty white, and they did not smell of machine oil. They smelled sterile, cold, and faintly sweet like a morgue. The taller one called himself Architect Sale. "We hear you have efficiency problems, Governor," he said. His voice was soft and rapping, not the grinding rasp of a dockside brute, but a whisper. "Your machines are suffering. They are crying. We can comfort them." I should have summoned the tech priests. I knew that. Any modification without sanction from Mars is tech heresy. They do not merely execute you for that. They make you into a servitor and keep the mind alive so you can suffer forever inside a body that no longer belongs to you. But the local tech priests did nothing except daub oil and chant that the machine spirit was angry. Reduce the pace, they said. Reduce the pace meant fail the tithe. Fail the tithe meant death. "What do you propose?" I asked. "A demonstration," Sale said, smiling. His smile was too wide, too many teeth. We went down to Sector 4, to the main generator for the plasma furnaces. It had been dead for a week. The casing was cracked. Plasma was leaking. The tech priest said it would take a month of purification rites and repairs. Sale walked up to the huge black machine. He did not pray. He did not anoint it with sacred oils. He only ran his hand across the metal and began to hum. It was not binary cant. It was a sound that made my teeth ache, a low guttural vibration. Then he drew a small container from the folds of his robe. Not a tool. It looked like a lump of flesh, pulsing, dark violet, wrapped in wires. Biogel perhaps, or something alive. He pressed it directly into the crack in the generator housing. I wanted to shout for him to stop, but the metal changed. It hissed, rippled like water, and closed around the flesh. The crack healed, not welded, healed like skin closing over a wound. The generator roared without a warm-up cycle. It leapt to full power in a second. Indicators across the chamber buried themselves. "Efficiency at 140%, Sale said calmly, watching the monitors. "And it will never overheat again. It is self-regulating now." I stood there, stunned by the scream of the machine and my own horror. "What is that?" I shouted over the noise. "Xenotechnology," he whispered, somehow in my ear though he stood a meter away. "Evolution. Flesh and machine are a single whole. We merely help them become friends. We can do this for your entire factory, Governor, free of charge." Free? In the Imperium nothing is free. We only need access and production waste. Biomatter you burn anyway. Lower hive corpses, rejects, canteen waste, we use them as lubricant. I looked at the generator. It ran smoothly, powerfully. It sang. If I agreed, the quarterly report would live. My skin would live. And what was tech heresy in that moment? A bureaucratic term. Mars was far away. Terra was far away. The generator was here, alive now, in front of me. "Do it," I said, "but no witnesses, and no priest of the Omnissiah puts his nose in here." Sale bowed. "A wise decision. Flesh is weak, Governor, but metal is eternal when it is properly fed." That night I dreamed the walls of my bedroom were breathing. The next day productivity doubled. The machines stopped breaking down. They ran quietly, smoothly. The workers began to complain that the machines were watching them, that levers felt warm like human hands, that voices could be heard inside the hum of the halls. I did not go down to see. I sat in my office and looked at the graphs. The graphs were beautiful, green arrows rising. I thought I had cheated the system. I thought I was using heretics to serve the emperor. What irony! I thought I was the one using them. Write that down. The accused sanctioned uncertified biotechnology of unknown origin. Dry words. You should have seen those machines, scribe. They were magnificent, they were alive, and they were hungry. Everything went perfectly until inspection day. That was the day I learned there are things worse than demons, bureaucrats from Terra. Write the next chapter about how I learned to lie while looking into the eyes of death. Do you think I feared demons or mutants? No. When you are governor, you learn quickly that nothing in the galaxy is more frightening than a man from Terra with a folder under his arm. A demon can be banished, a mutant can be burned, an administratum clerk can be stopped by neither bolter nor prayer. He carries a more terrible weapon, procedure. They arrived without warning, as auditors should. A shuttle bearing the crest of the monitoring department landed on my private platform. Not an inquisitor in power armor stepped out, but a small, dry little man. Prefect Hadrian Quill. He looked as if he had been pressed flat between the pages of a massive book. His skin was the color of old parchment. His fingers were ink-stained. Where his left eye should have been sat a complex optical augment that clicked and buzzed as it focused on details. "Prime Class Tithe Compliance Inspection," he rasped without greeting me. I sweat. For the first time in years, I felt cold sweat sliding down my spine beneath an expensive coat. If he saw Sale's modified engines, if he saw the drug-glazed eyes of the workers, if he saw that we fed the furnaces with corpses instead of purified coal, it was over. Exterminatus would have looked merciful. We walked a prepared route, cleaned in advance. I had ordered the floor in the main assembly hall scrubbed until it shone. The workers were dressed in clean robes. Anyone showing obvious signs of mutation or overdose had been locked in the lower warehouses. I prayed they would not start howling. Quill walked in silence. He did not look at people. People meant nothing to him. He watched the figures scrolling across his data slate and compared them to the wall meters. "Energy output exceeds nominal by 20%, he muttered, stopping at the plasma generator. Sale had healed. The machine hummed softly, almost contentedly. Quill stepped closer and ran a gloved hand over the casing. "Strange vibration," he said. His augmetic eye extended like the lens of a microscope. "Standard Lucius pattern generators do not sound like this. They rattle. This one seems to breathe." My heart stopped. Beneath the metal I could see the faint pulse of the same violet vein Sale had implanted. If Quill switched to thermal spectrum, he would see biomass. he would see that the machine was alive. We performed a deep lubrication cycle, I blurted. My voice betrayed me with a tremor. Experimental Mechanicus oils to reduce friction in service to the Emperor, of course. To give the front more energy. Quill froze, his eye buzzed as it scanned. He was a hair from the truth, a hair from naming me a tech heretic. So I did the only thing that could stop him. I struck the one weak point all bureaucrats share. Ambition. Prefect, I said more loudly, look here. I activated the hollow map of recent shipments. A towering green column reached upward. This is output for the previous quarter. We delivered 40% more plasma cells than any world in the subsector. If you halt this generator for inspection, that line falls here. I dragged my finger down into the red. Do you want to report to Terra that Imperial troops went without munitions in the middle of an offensive because of your inspection? Quill stood still. He looked at the pulsing machine, then the graph, then the machine again. I watched the struggle in his face, rules against results. There is a dirty secret in the Imperium, scribe. The rules are sacred, yes, but victory is sacred too. If you are winning, if you are feeding the war, the Imperium will close its eyes to how you do it for a time. Quill's optical lens retracted with a dry click. Impressive metrics, he said flatly. Your optimization methods certainly merit further review in the future. At present, uninterrupted supply remains the priority. He tapped his slate. Continue operations, Governor. May the Emperor preserve your efficiency. When he flew away, I vomited onto the landing platform. I knelt there wiping my mouth with a lace handkerchief and laughing. I had beaten the administratum. I had purchased my life with a lie. I thought the worst was behind me. I had forgotten an old rule. Free cheese exists only in a trap, and free repair work from heretics least of all. Sale and his architects returned that very night, and this time they did not come to offer services. They came to collect payment. Do you know what they asked for? Not money, not slaves. They wanted to conduct a ritual in the heart of my factory. Write this down, machine. Now I will tell you how my city began to scream, while I turned the music louder so I would not have to hear it. Have you ever heard metal scream? Not grind, not squeal from friction, scream like living flesh being flayed. I have heard it. I still hear it. Even this cursed Amasic cannot drown it. Sale came 2 days after the auditor departed. He did not request an audience. He walked into my office as if he owned it. The guards let him pass. Of course they did. By then they were taking his additives too. Time to settle the account, Cassian, he said, using my name for the first time without title or respect. I transferred the agreed funds, I said, trying to salvage some fragment of dignity. Gold, as promised. Sale laughed, a dry whispering sound. Gold is trash for fools. We require energy. Come, you must see what we have made if you are to understand its greatness. We descended to the very bottom, Sector 9, where ore was smelted. It was always hot there like the mouth of a dragon. But that day the heat was different, sticky, wet. The air smelled not of sulfur and cinders, but of copper and a slaughterhouse. When the lift doors opened, I saw them. My factories changed. Pipes running along the hall pulsed to some invisible heartbeat. Metal shone under an oily film like sweat. And the hum, that hum, did not merely shake the ears. It shook the bones. It sounded like a prayer spoken in a language that should not exist. In the center of the hall, above the main melting vat, stood a structure made of wires, bones, and dark iron. An altar. No, something worse. A transmitter or a receiver. Around it stood salespeople and my workers, the drugged ones. They formed a circle, swaying, whispering in rhythm with the machines. What is this? I said, grabbing Sale by the sleeve. Stop it, if the Arbites see this. The Arbites are asleep, he said softly, and the machines are hungry. They need a spark to rise to the next level. Watch. He raised his hand. One of the workers, a young man with empty eyes, stepped forward to the edge of the vat. Below, it was not simply molten steel that churned. The liquid glowed violet and pink. The boy did not cry out. He did not resist. He just stepped into the void. I shut my eyes. I waited for a splash, for the smell of burning flesh. Instead, I heard a sound. The vat roared, not the sound of a body hitting liquid metal, the sound of a swallow, a huge, greedy swallow. Light burst across the chamber. Pressure gauges on the walls exploded. The conveyor belts lurched into motion so fast that the components blurred. "You see," Sale whispered in ecstasy. "Sacrifice yields energy. A soul merges with the machine. Now that boy is part of eternity. He has become the shell that will punch through the armor of your enemies. Is that not the highest honor?" I wanted to draw the pistol from my belt. I carried an ornate las pistol under my coat. I could have put a beam through Sale's skull then and there. But I looked at the output displays. The numbers were climbing with insane speed. 200%, 250. We were making a month's target in a single shift. If I killed Sale, everything stopped. If I stopped it, the tithe failed. I remembered Drake's face. I remembered the threat of exterminatus. I remembered the cold of space. My hand slipped off the holster. I stood there and watched a second worker walk to the edge, and then a third. I began to count. 1 swallow flash. 2 swallow flash. I did not shoot. I did not shout. I simply became an accountant of slaughter with blood up to my elbows. "How many?" I asked hoarsely. 10 souls per shift," Sale said without even looking at me. "And your sector will become a jewel of the Imperium. 10 souls, 30 a day, 900 a month. On a planet of 12 billion, that is a statistical error, fewer than die in industrial accidents. Logic, cold trader's logic." "Continue," I said, and my voice sounded steadier than I expected. "But record the bodies as workplace accidents, and increase food allotments to the families of the dead." Sale looked at me. There was no respect in his eyes, only mockery. "As you wish, partner." I left without turning back, but I could feel every part of the factory watching me go. It was no longer a heap of metal. It had awakened, and it knew I was the one who fed it. That night I ordered the lift doors to Sector 9 welded shut. I told myself I was isolating the evil, controlling it. But evil does not stay inside a lift. It runs through wires. It soaks into walls. Soon the walls of my own palace began to whisper. "Write this down. The accused knowingly permitted human sacrifice on an industrial scale. But do not forget to add that those sacrifices armed an entire crusade." There was no guilt left after that, not much story left either, only the end, gold and ash, the coming of the Inquisition. Brace yourself, this part hurts. Do you know how the Inquisition arrives? Cheap-picked dramas show sirens, explosions, drop pods punching through palace roofs to heroic music. Lies. The Inquisition arrives in silence. It happened on Triumph Day. We had shipped a record consignment, 3 million tons of munitions, 200,000 units of heavy equipment. My altered factories ran so fast that the air around them trembled with warp strain, though no one dared say it aloud. I stood on the balcony of the spire. Below, the square was full of banners, music, golden aquilas. I was waiting for a message from the administratum. I was waiting for a medal. I was waiting for someone to tell me, "Well done, Vale. You saved the sector." Instead, the lights died. Not only the lamps, everything, cranes, cogitators, every humming line in the city. A tomb silence fell over Halcyon Prime. Millions of people stopped speaking at the same instant. I lifted my eyes to the sky. Usually the sky above Halcyon Prime was foul yellow with smog. That day the clouds were torn apart by the hulls of ships. They hung in low orbit, black as the void. Massive cruisers marked with the sigil of the Inquisition, the skulls struck through. They did not request landing clearance. They did not hail us. They only hung there and blotted out the light. I could feel their gaze, heavy, physical, condemning. The doors to my office opened without a knock. The guards did not try to stop them. My soldiers, my elite troops, simply dropped to their knees and let their weapons fall. Fear of the Inquisition is written deeper into the genes of an imperial citizen than self-preservation. He entered, not a space marine, only a man, short, in a plain black cloak without ornament or gold, only a silver rosette at his breast. His face was hidden by a hood. All I could see was a jaw hard as granite. Behind him floated two gray servo skulls sensing the air with incense to smother the stink of my sins. I stood behind my desk shaking, not with fear but with rage. "Who gave you leave?" I shouted. "I am the planetary governor. I fulfill Terra's will. Look at the reports." I seized the infoplate with my production graphs and thrust it at him like a shield. 300% of target, I shouted. "We armed the Obsidian front. We are the best. You do not have the right to halt these works." The Inquisitor stopped. Slowly he lifted a black-gloved hand and took the plate. He looked at it for a second, 2 seconds, then closed his fingers. Plastic cracked. Glass snapped. Sparks fell across my costly carpet. He broke the labor of my entire life in one hand without blinking. "Your efficiency is impressive, Cassian Vale," he said. His voice was quiet, yet it filled the room. The voice of a judge who had already signed the sentence. "But the Imperium has no need of cursed ammunition." "Cursed," I shrieked. "It kills the enemy." "It whispers," he said. "Every shell that has left your lines in the last 6 months carries taint. Guardsmen who touch them lose their minds. Tanks fed with your fuel turn their guns on allies. You did not arm your sector, Governor. You poisoned it." I stepped backward until the cold window touched my spine. "I did not know. I only wanted." "You knew," he cut in. "You knew when you signed the order cutting food. You knew when you let criminals into your halls. You knew when you allowed heretics to feed your machines with human flesh. You sold your world's soul piece by piece and thought that because you sold it slowly, no one would notice." He threw back his hood. His face was ruined by scars, and his eyes were wholly white, no pupils at all. A psyker. "We are not here for you, Governor," he said. "You are dust. We are here to burn out the infection." He walked to the window and looked down at the city. "Purge protocol," he said into the Vox bead. Then it began. From the black ships I saw drop craft pour downward. I saw the fiery streaks of bombardment smash into the industrial districts, the very factories I had been so proud of. Sector 9 vanished first in the bloom of a nuclear blast, along with Sail, the altar, and every one of my records. I watched my achievements burn. I watched gold become ash. "Why," I whispered, sliding to the floor, "we could have cleansed them. We could have purified them." "Rot is not purified," the Inquisitor answered without turning back. "It is cut away. You will be judged not for failure, Cassian Vale, but for succeeding in the service of the enemy while calling it service to the throne." The storm troopers took me. They dragged me through the corridors of my own palace. I saw the bodies of my servants. I saw tapestries with my portrait burning on the walls. And do you know what was worst? I felt no remorse. I looked at the fire and thought, at least we met the quota. At least we proved what we could do. That is madness, is it not? Or perhaps it is the only kind of sanity possible in a universe where gods hunger for blood. They are coming now. Do you hear the heavy boots? 1 minute left, one final signature. Be ready, scribe, this is the end. I want you to write my last words, so they burn the eyes of whoever reads them. Rise, the time has come, former Governor Vale. 1 second, gentlemen, let me set the final mark. Did you write everything, Meat? Every word? Good. Now listen carefully. This is not for the record. This is for you, or for whatever miserable clerk opens this file in 100 years. Look at me. You call me a monster. You will execute me to soothe the conscience of the Imperium. You will tell the people, behold, the corruption has been removed. Now you are safe. That is the lie, the greatest lie in the galaxy. The Imperium is not the golden throne. It is not holy hymns. It is a gigantic meat grinder, and someone has to turn the handle, a rusted, greasy, shrieking handle. Today I turned it. I fed it my conscience, my soul, and the people of my world, so that your war could keep eating the mince that came out the other side. Tomorrow you will seat another man in my chair, a saint, a pure one, and in a year he will face the same choice, the tithe or morality, the plan or the people. And do you know what will happen? If he chooses the people, you will execute him for incompetence. If he chooses the plan, he becomes me. I do not ask forgiveness. I do not repent. I am Cassian Vale. I am the man who held up the sky while you prayed. I am the man who fed the furnace so you would not freeze. My hands are soaked to the elbows in blood, yes, but look at your gloves, Commissar. They are clean only because I did the dirty work for you. In the name of the God Emperor and the Holy Inquisition, you are sentenced to death. The Commissar's voice was even, dull. Go on then, shoot, do it. And when my factories fall silent, when your rifle jams in battle for lack of proper grease, when the dark comes for you, you will remember me. You will beg the throne for another man like me to restart the machines. Because in this universe the righteous die first, and only men like me survive. Efficient men. This is my final signature. Take your tithe, Emperor.